Good morning, everyone. I'm Greg Moss, and welcome to the 2021 Pebc Superintendent Forum. For nearly 4 decades now, the Public Education Business Coalition, otherwise known as Pebc, has been working alongside teachers and principals, developing new teachers and providing high-quality professional development for educators across their careers. You may also know Pebc is promoting policies that elevate the teaching profession, and we certainly need them now. Pebc has been holding this annual Superintendent Forum since the very beginning of its inception. In fact, this is the 39th Superintendent Forum. And as you might remember, the 2020 event was 100% remote. This year, we've got another first. Today's forum has a little bit of a hybrid format, with some of us live here in studio, while others are joining us remotely from around the country. As usual, though, we're looking forward to hearing a great discussion from our panelists and from you. Now, the panel is going to be sharing learnings from this difficult school year and how they can help us build a more resilient system as we look forward to the future. Before I introduce you to the panelists, I would like to invite Sue Sava, who's the president and CEO of Pebc, to talk about Pebc's leadership of this education system resiliency and innovation initiative.
Thank you so much, Greg. I'm so excited to be here today to talk about one of the ways that Pebc is ensuring that we capture the right learnings from this past year in order to build a more resilient system for the future. Through the Education System Resiliency and Innovation Initiative, Pebc and the Keystone Policy Center assembled more than 80 education system leaders, educators, government officials, and stakeholders from within and outside the education system. The goal is to develop new approaches to improve support for the teaching workforce, deliver instruction that better prepares all students for an ever-evolving world, and address issues within the education system that perpetuate inequities and achievement gaps that were only exacerbated during disruptive events like the pandemic. Participants of the Education System Resiliency and Innovation Initiative focused their conversations on the hopeful, aspirational question: what could this look like if we as a state reimagined schooling boldly, focused on students and the educators who serve them? We are so grateful for the collaboration and the support of the Mortgage Family Foundation, the Betcher Foundation, and the Gates Family Foundation for believing in us and for funding this innovative coalition. In February, the initiative published a report with 16 recommendations that focused on educator workforce, teaching and learning, and teacher training and supports. Senate Bill 21-185 draws on several recommendations from this collective work, as well as the previous work of the Colorado legislature, the Colorado Department of Education, and the state's broad education ecosystem. The bill seeks to reduce teacher shortages in Colorado, empower local leaders in recruiting subject matter experts into the education workforce, develop a workforce that more closely reflects the diversity of Colorado students, which we so desperately need, elevate the teaching profession, expand pathways into the profession, and raise the profile of all pathways into the education workforce. We are honored to have remarks from my dear friend and colleague, Commissioner Katie Anthus, our Colorado Commissioner of Education, and it is also my honor to introduce Governor Jared Polis, a true education leader and ally. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Pebc and everyone, for having me today. It's an honor to be with you. You know, superintendents, district staff, school leaders, and educators have all done heroic work over the past year. We've all learned way more than we wanted to about social distancing, cohorting, quarantining, COVID testing, vaccines, and HVAC systems. Through it all, educators and school leaders have demonstrated over and over again that they are flexible, adaptable, resilient, and persistent in their support of students. But make no mistake, the pandemic has also been stressful and relentless and too often just heartbreaking. But I think we've all learned some things too. One of the things we've learned is that in large part, our educators and our students have been incredibly resilient. Educators turned on a dime last fall to adapt their lessons to online, and they kept learning and refining to improve their practice and support their students. And our students have also proven to be resilient. Yes, they have struggled, but most of them are persevering, and they're learning a lot too through adversity and challenge. I know we have seen some disengagement, and certainly that is a huge concern that we need to pay attention to. But we've also seen the vast majority of students keep at it day after day, wearing masks and trying their best in these difficult times. The other thing the pandemic has proven is our system can indeed be flexible, adaptable, and innovative. We had to upend our systems and a lot of our policies in just a few weeks. So I know we can continue to innovate and better meet the needs of our employers and our students. For example, many of our high school students have enjoyed a hybrid or more flexible schedule so that they can work during the pandemic. I'd like to see this flexibility continue to be explored so we can expand our opportunities for internships and apprenticeships moving forward. We've known for a long time that more flexibility was needed in the system to expand work-based learning opportunities. This pandemic has proven we can indeed build more flexibility into our system. We also know that there will be serious impacts on learning, and those impacts are being felt disproportionately by students who are already vulnerable. We proved that we know how to innovate and adapt, so I'm confident we'll be able to use the federal and state dollars we are receiving to support our students to make up opportunities they lost and move into next year and beyond stronger. We have a lot of work to do to ensure that all of our students have the opportunities to make up for things they missed. But the work we've seen over the past year makes me confident we can and will support all of our students. Lastly, during the pandemic, we learned the importance of school reopening was much more than just educational. It was also economic. We know that our educational systems must be strong for our students, but they also play an important part in serving our families, communities, and businesses. We literally needed our educational systems in play in order to return to work, and our economies were built on that return of employees. This leads me to underscore the importance of working together as a community in creating well-funded, healthy, and robust educational systems. Because our businesses depend on education in many more ways than just having the high-quality skilled team members to hire. Thank you so much for all you have done this past year. I know you have been resilient throughout this year as well, and I know that we can continue to partner and work together to build back even stronger. Thank you.
Our teachers, principals, and superintendents have gone above and beyond the call of duty over the last 3 semesters, and we're so grateful. The vast majority of teachers have safely returned to the classroom and are playing a critical role in filling learning gaps and ensuring that our students can continue finding success and achieving social and academic goals as we work to build back stronger. And both our heroes in classrooms across the state and administrators are working tirelessly to provide resources for educators and students from the important alliance that protects the future of our children and each of our community's futures. I want to thank everyone watching today for supporting a brighter tomorrow for preschool through 12th grade education in the state of Colorado. And thank you to the State Board of Education, the state legislators, members of the business community, nonprofit organizations like the PEBC, for helping to pave a dedicated lane for our students that really helps fast track and superpower their growth. By working together on opportunities like the Education System Resiliency and Innovation Initiative, we improve support for our teaching workforce to help equip our students with the education they need to succeed in the fast evolving world. I'm proud that voters are voting to support education and that we're able to restore many of the cuts to education. Colorado is a place where everyone can thrive, regardless of your background, race, geography, socioeconomic status. You know, access to education is a critical part of achieving that mission. Thank you for your leadership and partnership as we set a bold plan into motion.
And Governor Polis, thank you for your partnership. Now for some quick housekeeping this morning. We have a chat feature that I see some folks are already enjoying, so feel free to say hello to the other folks that are watching today. We're going to take a question or two from the audience at the end, if time permits, so please drop those questions into the chat feature now. Of course, as you know, PEBC is a not-for-profit organization, and we want to keep the registration costs low from here out and into the future, and your donations are greatly appreciated and will help us do that, so thank you. This event, of course, would not be possible without the support of individuals like you and our generous sponsors for this morning. So a big thank you to JP Morgan Chase for leading the way as our presenting sponsor today. We also want to thank Kaiser Permanente for supporting teachers and educators as an official sponsor. And we would like to recognize our lineup of supporting sponsors. First Bank, Colorado, Para, Cigna, Pinnacle Assurance, Peak Resources, Wheeler Trigg O'Donnell, Aurora Television, who is hosting us this morning, Ramon Montoya, and Grandma B. Romer. And another special thank you again to our title sponsor, JPMorgan Chase. And let's hear from PBC board member Debbie Tolley. Debbie is a relationship executive at JPMorgan Chase.
Hello and good morning. My name is Debbie Tolley, and I'm an executive director in government banking for JPMorgan Chase. I also sit on my firm's local leadership team, and this year we are proud to sponsor the PEBC Superintendent Forum. In honor of Teacher Appreciation Week, I want to recognize our incredible Colorado teachers. We appreciate you and are so impressed with how you are adapting and impacting students. We have a deep admiration for our educators because you have demonstrated leadership and resiliency since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is often said that 2020 was an unprecedented year, but I'm confident through collaborations such as today's event, we will continue to make classrooms better and stronger. In Colorado, JPMorgan Chase has been part of the landscape since before statehood, and throughout the years, we've donated millions of dollars to local nonprofits that help lift our community. We've built our reputation on being there for our employees, clients, and communities in the most critical times. Today's environment is no different. We realize that our actions during this crisis are essential to creating an inclusive recovery and building a more equitable future for everyone. Our local leadership and our employees are deeply committed to Colorado, donating their time to important local organizations like PEBC. We live here and we want to make a difference. Congratulations on your inspiring and innovative work to support teachers and students' success in Colorado. Thank you and have a great event.
Thanks so much, Debbie, and thank you again for your support. All right, let's go over now and join me as we meet our panelists for this morning. As I walk over to the main set area here, I want to thank all of our panelists who are superintendents and leaders in the business community for taking time out of your busy schedule. We really appreciate it. It's good to see you. Going to start with my good friend Rico. Rico Munn is superintendent of Aurora Public Schools. Next to him is Chris Kadowski, superintendent of Adams 12 5-star schools. Bree Jones, who is the superintendent at Levita Schools. Good to see you. Tiffany Bray, thank you for joining us, Vice President Government Programs for DeVita Village Health, and Elizabeth Domain, Superintendent of Manitou Springs School District. Thanks for driving up this morning. And joining us virtually right now is Natalie Almalak, who is the Area Vice President in Strategic Partnerships and Ventures at Excel Energy. So Natalie, thank you. We'll get to her in just a moment. Rico, I'm going to start with the first question with you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Talk about some of the opportunities to redesign a system for equity and design and ways to improve education as we kind of come out of the pandemic and look forward here.
Well, we talk about a lot of unplanned learning that happened during the pandemic. A lot of things that we didn't plan on learning lessons about as far as technology and our students' lives and well-beings. And we want to take advantage of that and really think about how we can change our systems and structures. I think there's a real chance to change our design mentality. When I talk about that, what I mean is we used to talk about what's the perfect environment for education and teaching and learning, and then try to bend the world around that. We had to spend this year thinking about what are the challenges we have to overcome first, what are the restrictions, what are the things that we've got to deal with as far as quarantines, and then thinking about what fundamentally can our students do, what capabilities do they have, and then design to that. I think that may be a better way of thinking about equity going forward, really thinking about that and starting our design with those things.
Awesome. I believe, Nadia, do you have anything you want to add to? Sorry, I didn't mean to scare you there. And Nadia, I want to make sure that we thank you for joining us. Is that from your home? Because it looks like the set of Downton Abbey as well. It could be. It's beautiful.
It actually is. Yeah, it's really not that fancy. It just
So Nadia, do you have any thoughts about how we include more equity and diversity in the way we design systems here moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a major focus for us as well. Hopefully there isn't an hearing but hopefully you can. I think that being cognizant and aware of how we're seeing these impacts, not only touch our students and our educators, but the business community as well. And I really appreciated the point earlier that our public schools are not only, educating our future leaders and community members, but it's a vital piece of our economic backbone. So making sure that system and the educators reflect our communities at large is absolutely critical. So I think the first step is being aware. The second step is, adapting, learning, listening, and just making it a priority. And I know on the business side, we're doing that as well.
Absolutely. All right, Nadia El-Malak, thank you. Chris, let's go to you. You've heard all the comments so far. You had to pivot really quick over the last year and a half or so, but now as we kind of come out of this, being intentional and looking forward and bringing more inclusivity, what do you do to redesign a system?
I think the starting place is you have to listen to your community, to your kids, and see where they're at. We need to take stock about where our students are now, given the events of the last year, and those events are not just about the pandemic and COVID. We've had a tremendous social justice event in our country that's really affected so many of our kids, and taking stock of where they're at, how they're feeling is important. We've started doing some of that work in Adams 12. One thing that's been fairly controversial in a lot of communities is the presence of school resource officers, police officers in schools. So we've checked in with our kids and asked them, how do you feel about SROs in your school? Are they friend or foe? Are they an important part of your school experience? And we were pleasantly surprised that significant majorities of students, whether they're in an affluent setting, a high poverty setting, whether they're Latinx, Black, white, all of our students, not all of our students, but large percentages of our students across a lot of demographics said that was a plus. We want to listen to our students more about this intersection between equity and mental health. Some of the conversations I've had recently from kids said, my mental health is actually better right now than it's been at some other times, which is contrary to the prevailing narrative out there. For the ones I was talking to, so much of that was because we had a 4-day in-person schedule with a Wednesday asynchronous day. And they said a day to be away from the stress and pressure of going to school and then going on to work or extracurriculars and homework all night long. They actually felt like Wednesday, this async day, gave them a chance to pause and breathe and de-stress and catch up. So I feel like in this year ahead, I want to do a lot more listening to our kids and their parents about what they need. How do we get you back in attendance? How do we get you from having your camera off all day long and being present with us again? And then I think once we know what they're needing, we can step in and support them much more effectively than we did in the past.
Good points. Bree, your perspective from a little bit different school district.
Yeah, much smaller school district. So when we think about equity and access for rural students, the pandemic's opened a lot of opportunities that we didn't see prior. Access to classwork and coursework over remote helps a lot in giving access to students who might not have had classes before. So we've been really creative about thinking how to get past simple academic mastery and into the idea of developing an academic mindset. How do we provide real world opportunities for our students where they communicate with others and collaborate effectively? How do we give them opportunities to think critically and problem solve that have to do with solving real problems? And I think this has opened opportunities for rural students that we've not seen before.
And things that will continue. I mean, lessons learned, and if there's anything positive to come out of a pandemic, perhaps that's what we can lean into, looking at those kinds of things. Yes?
Yeah, so one thing that Chris said struck me, because when I think about the past year in our business setting, we have had to lean in on conversations around mental health, around social injustice, and as adults, there are varying levels of comfort having those kinds of conversations depending on the background we come from, the kinds of conversations that we've had or didn't have as children and adolescents growing up. So I think it's just amazing that you're having those more intentional conversations. Teaching kids how to lean into those dialogues at an early age is really going to help the business community as we get older and age into those conversations as adults. So that just struck me as being super critical right now.
And Tiffany, your perspective from a worldwide corporation, I mean, tens of thousands of employees.
Yes.
I mean, we have a lot of lessons to learn from you as well about this subject.
It's so personal, geographic dependent. You know, what we saw over the past year in our facilities around the country is conversations are very localized in terms of what you're going to talk about, what you're seeing in your local communities.
Elizabeth, you have a perspective from, again, a smaller school district.
And I would also add, as a new superintendent too, in my second year in the superintendency, this has been a pretty interesting start, and I really have appreciated. I think there's not been a better time to lead in public education. I feel really honored to be in that role right now. One of the things that we've always talked about is how do we make sure that the systems that we're creating are honoring and supportive and also continuing to grow. So what is our current reality and what's our best hope for our future hopes? And then as we sort of think about what students are experiencing and what our staff and our families are also, how does that philosophy connect to processes and then implementation? I think as we think about equity and access, sometimes we think it's an implementation process problem. Sometimes we think it's about what was sort of going on at the start of this, but oftentimes it is back to philosophy. And I think as we continue to lean into our core values of what we believe all students deserve, each and every student all the time, then we'll continue to develop better systems. And we'll learn from these processes. And I agree, the more time we spend listening to our children and what's important to them, they have great ideas. I just met with a group of students earlier in the week, a little superintendent's advisory council. And as we're leaving, they said, rather than using Google for emailing, do you mind using this other system that we use? And I said, well, what's the system that you use? And it's an app that we use for sports and other activities. And I said, sure. And I think that just us as adults and leaders and learners having to be flexible also and understanding the ways that our students want to be communicated with and to. And that's going to keep us flexible as well. So I think we can't do enough listening and learning as in our current roles. So thank you.
Very true. And I think this internet thing's going to catch on. I'm just saying. So our next question it will sound like it's more geared to the classroom and to our educators, but I think our business leaders can weigh in a little bit too, just from your perspective. But Chris, I'm going to start with you on this next question. What lessons can teachers bring to their students about agility in the face of profound shift? Clearly, we've not seen this in 100 plus years, so there's a lot of lessons here.
Well, so much of the focus this last year has been on big agility and pivots, and the big pivots from in-person to remote and then sometimes back to in-person. I think the most important takeaway is having our teachers model little a agility and showing the flexibility that Elizabeth was just talking about in all of our different roles. So just a few examples of what I think is going to be really important for us to be more comfortable with in the future. If you have a student who passes away in an auto accident or because of an illness that unexpectedly has a student passing away at night, which we had at a couple of our high schools this year, for teachers to say, I know we're supposed to do a math test today, or we're supposed to do this assignment, but we're just going to talk about how you're feeling and how you're processing this. And we might check in the next day, and if we're still hurting and working through this, we'll punt the test another day. If you're supposed to go to the zoo and the bus breaks down before you get there, instead of everyone having a rant, for the teacher to step in and have the kids sing a song or to do some trivia or some discussion about the things you might see at the zoo and make it a learning moment, a positive moment. If you're supposed to do some sort of internet-based instruction for the day and the internet's down, just quickly adjusting without your hair on fire to some other instructional strategy. That kind of agility, if our teachers can model it and our kids can learn that and embody it and implement it, I think we'll all be much further down the road and much better for it.
And Bree, you would agree that those are life lessons that you carry into your adulthood, right?
I completely agree. I think learning how to learn is something that teachers can really model for our students right now, and I think viewing challenges as opportunities is really important in this moment. We had a need to broadcast our basketball games because we couldn't let fans into the gym. And so we took that opportunity, and I targeted a teacher to take on a class to teach broadcasting. She doesn't know anything about that. And so we brought in an industry expert to serve as the teacher on the side. Our students are learning how to produce the games, and they're running graphics and running 3 cameras, and they're learning as they go. It's a really uncomfortable space for our teachers to be in, and it's important, I think, that we continue to model that kind of learning as we move forward.
Yeah.
That the teachers don't always have to have all the answers, but that they have to model how to learn and get those answers and apply them.
Yeah, very good point. I want to get Nadia and Tiffany's perspective a little bit from the private sector. Nadia, we'll go to you now. What are your thoughts about the big A, as Chris says?
I mean, great points. I think all of us are in this together. And so really appreciated the dialogue around our educators and teachers not having all the answers. On the business side, that was a big piece of the puzzle, right? Acknowledging and having that space for, we're figuring this out together, and how do we collaborate? So I believe that is one of the biggest pieces, is that if we take a really big step back in thinking about education, a core component is to prepare our youth for the future. And, life doesn't have a script. And how often do we, personally, professionally, whatever it is, having to adjust? This is obviously a massive event of a global pandemic. But I do think one of the tools we used at Excel Energy was having that ability to step back and say, it's okay that we don't have all of the answers. And I think we've seen that with our schools. I've got a child in kindergarten right now. And, hats off to our educators and the districts, because we're all going to have to adapt here. But I also strongly agree that we need to lean in on thinking differently. So this is an opportunity. I don't think the education system, any of us really, have had to adapt in this way. I mean, there's disruptive threats in business and things like that, but this gives us a great opportunity to take a step back and have that flexibility, like the Wednesday off day where it's asynchronous learning. I love that. So, and even in the workplace, remote work and things like that. So yeah. I'll stop there, but I think being able to adapt is key.
Rico, you've had to adapt quite a bit here at Aurora Public Schools, and you've leaned into it in a big way.
Yeah, certainly. And I think when we talk about agility, I think it's really important to remember that it's not just, it's not a character trait, it's a skill. And it's also an important mental health support, I believe, mental health tool that we teach our kids. You have an opportunity to mourn whatever the loss is, whatever you wanted to do, plan to do, but that there's a skill set involved with then transitioning to whatever that next thing is and addressing that. And in the classroom and opportunities, we've had so many opportunities to adapt and demonstrate agility that I think there's time to step back and walk kids through, okay, here's the process. Here's how I mourned whatever the loss was, and now here's how I worked to develop the next set of plans or the next set of things, and to move on into the next process to accomplish what I set out to do. And I think that's an incredibly valuable opportunity that we need to take advantage of.
Tiffany, from the private sector again,
Yes.
I have a little insight into DaVita, but what struck me how DaVita leaned into this from agility is the fact that the senior leadership was so open and
Yes.
you could not over communicate because I could hear my wife next door to me with all of these town hall meetings. And,
Yes.
but it was
Yes.
very inspiring to hear that kind of communication.
Absolutely. I think so much of it starts at the top. If your leadership, your CEO, your senior vice presidents are having open dialogue about how you need to be nimble and flexible and agile during this time, it starts to trickle down to the organization. Yeah. And as a working mom, I have 2 kids in middle school, and you're caught in this feeling of how far behind are my kids getting this year? And I think what you all are talking about as it relates to the other skills that they're learning, we just have to take a step back and say they may not have learned all the book things that they needed to learn this year, but they sure did learn life skills, because that's exactly the skills that we're trying to work through as a business organization. Our priorities are changing on a daily basis. We're dealing with a ton of COVID positive patients in our dialysis facilities, and how do you change your operations in order to be able to handle that? Well, if the kids are learning that in the classroom, the teachers are helping them, then they're going to be well set up to be business leaders in the future.
And for full disclosure, I don't work for DaVita.
But I do.
But you do, and my wife did, and I didn't listen to anything confidential, I swear. But I was very impressed. Elizabeth,
Sure.
Final word here.
I think with agility, we as in this great public education sphere need to really encourage risk-taking that's calculated, that's exciting, that's innovative, and understand that the first time we try something, it may not be perfect. It wasn't perfect. Perfect wasn't an attainable goal pre-COVID and pre-pandemic. And so just encouraging our staff and our students to do things that are stepping out of a comfort zone. And when it doesn't go great, well, how can I help you? What can we do differently? How can we support each other? And I think as much as we can continue to model that, it's just going to allow us to be more agile, more resilient in other circumstances, because we will continue to have challenges in our lives. And what do we take away from that is let's just be stronger together. And in order to have this ability to be agile, you have to be in teams and collaborate and create spaces for dialogue and discussion and sort of take some of the hierarchical structures out of the way so that we can listen to everyone with an equal voice and a seat at the table is super important. And we've seen that when we made the best decisions, we had more stakeholders involved.
Keeping with the theme of stakeholders and collaboration and teamwork and working together, this next question really is, we're going to start with our private sector partners here. And in fact, Tiffany, we'll start with you. Because we understand the job of superintendents, especially now, is very similar to the CEO of a large corporation. It's almost like being the mayor of a city as well, and a governor, and everything else that you would want to be. But what lessons are really important to support school? How can businesses really support school systems in transferring those lessons learned that you have and also transferring resources?
Yeah, I think just the first piece is acknowledgement of that. I mean, when you're talking about HVAC systems, I guess I never would have thought that a superintendent was going to spend a lot of time thinking about HVAC systems this year. And it really does resonate how much accountability and responsibility superintendents have. And so I think about it from a couple of levels. You know, one, I really enjoy being part of PEBC as a business leader so that I can engage with the superintendents in these kinds of forums, in the Catalyst meetings, our board meetings, you know, just exchanging information, ideas on how we can share and learn about each other and find all the common similarities that we can develop best practices, share best practices, et cetera. But then I think also at a local level, you know, there's opportunities for individual business leaders in their local communities to give gifts, you know, funding into schools as needed and requested. There's always questions and asks coming in to be in the classroom and to share what it's like to be a business professional. I know we were working, Rico, on some video content that businesses could provide for remote learning throughout the year. So I think take every opportunity that is shared through these dialogues to work both at a state level and at a local level with your local communities. Yeah. Is where I'd like to see us lean in more.
Good point. Nadia, we'll toss this question to you as well. And from your perspective at Excel, I know you would echo everything we just heard, but also how do you help school districts retain some top talent now? That's going to be, I think, a huge priority in the next year or so.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think as business, we're also thinking about the same things. But investing in really the people, right? The educators, making sure that we are sharing those best practices and collaborating. So I think a lot of times we think about financial support, and that's definitely critical. But for the success of our districts, our educators, the students, we really should be investing a lot through internships. We've got programs where we work with local high schools. Giving, dollars is wonderful and absolutely necessary, but good old-fashioned time. So whether that's mentoring our student, being actively engaged, I love the curriculum, and the Tiffany, what you were just mentioning, all of that makes a really big difference. And I would also say for business, there's so many different ways to get involved, but thinking about how your organization, your mission ties and links to, and values to those of our schools is a great way to have that support. But I'd love to see more, rotations of having teachers actually and educators come in to business Probably couldn't do it necessarily vice versa, although we do have licensed educators working at our companies. But really thinking about how do we get some of that innovation and knowledge transfer, I do believe is going to help retain talent. And so, the final thought is, I would say, as we look at, our investments and grants in the communities, over 80, of our over 89 foundation grant partners, 40 of them are focused on education with an emphasis on STEAM. And so, we're really focused on how do we lead the clean energy transition. That's a great opportunity to link up with educators and say, how is your electricity generated? What's the future of electric transportation, and why is that exciting for the next generation of our workforce? So lots of opportunities, but I'd love to see some innovation around how we actually cross-pollinize and get people, in different settings.
Very good point. All right, superintendents, now it's your opportunity to kind of put your hat on and say to the business world, what do you want? What do you need? How do you build the three legs of this stool, time, talent, and treasure? Chris?
So I may follow up on what Nadia was sharing. She raises some interesting ideas. One idea that comes to mind is having business leaders from big organizations come in to our central offices and audit, review, and provide feedback around how we're staffed and resourced. We did that before I was in this role. My predecessor did 15 or so years ago. What we saw at that time were these external audits said, you're staffed at like 1/3 of a private sector IT department. You're staffed at 1/2 of a private sector HR department. And all through our organization, our communications and marketing team, we are a ghost of what the private sector typically has in terms of staffing and resources. And I think there could be some benefit in people coming in and seeing if that's still the truth, still the case 15 years later. I think it's actually worse given all the budget cuts that we've been through. And if that all proved to be true, for business to lean in and say, public education isn't this big bloated bureaucracy, because that's one of the narratives that we're often battling against, sometimes in the business sector. And it would be really validating to have people say, they invited us in, we took a deep look, we've compared what they're doing against what we're doing. This isn't a bloated bureaucracy. Because if we're able to add some more people in, I think, I look at my colleagues to my right and my left, we've been in these seats for quite a long time now, but a number of our colleagues have left, and I think a key factor for many of them is just burnout. We are often so thinly resourced in our leadership ranks to do all of what people expect us to do. And if we're able to add some more folks in to drive initiatives and support the problem solving that has to go on, I think the burnout factor in the CEO seat in schools would be quite a bit less.
Good point. Anyone else, Rico? Rico, when you started your job, you had hair down to your shoulders. So I'm telling you, man, it's pretty stressful, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it was dreadlocks, actually. I really appreciate something that Tiffany said, that a real starting point is for business to recognize some of the complexity that really is in public education. I stepped out of the private corporate world into the superintendency, and I can tell you that the private sector corporations don't really understand and appreciate the complexity of what we do, be it a large district or a small district, all the different moving parts, processes that we have to address. And that's not to complain about the work, it's really to identify there is a difference. And recognizing that difference and helping support some public education about those differences, some of the moving parts, some of those things. Because business leaders have very influential voices in our communities, be it through chambers of commerce or be it with elected officials, to say, we need to spend more time understanding the complexities before we start trying to legislate fixes or push for big changes without really understanding all the levers that will impact. I think that's a really important role that business leaders can play at the macro level. Yeah. At the ground level, I think some of the things that Nadia talked about, Tiffany talked about, as far as just pure support resources are always valuable and welcome.
Very good. Elizabeth?
One of the things that I've seen is that our parents are the same folks who are working in lots of different industries and other aspects of the private sector. And they have been tremendous in this time. What do you need? How can we help? Do you need somebody to come in and look at your HVAC system as just a consultant? We don't want a project. We want to make sure that we can help you out. I think that's really important for small school districts also. In a day, we can wear a lot of different hats. And so I just would add that we need to continue to seek our parents and the great opportunities they can contribute, and they want to, and they have really been available to us. And I would also add that small gestures go a long way. We had a coffee shop in Manitou Springs who just said, I'd like to give $5 to every single staff in the community. That went a long way. They went into town, they got a cup of coffee and some pastries, and they felt like they were supported. So as much as those sort of sponsorships, those are big wins, and when it comes without an ask is really, really important. So we can't say enough about our partnerships. It makes us be more successful, and just really grateful.
Thank you.
Can I get tactical for a second? Because what I'm hearing, well, in the business world, this is I want to get to action. So, because a couple of things that I heard is, so at the grassroots level, it sounds like we could, as business leaders or business community, reach out to our local superintendents and volunteer or principals. Is that the best way locally?
Yeah, that would
to
be
get
great.
in?
That would be great.
Awesome. And so that would be my suggestion. Any business people that are on the phone, reach out to your local leaders and say, how can I help you? And then Chris, from your perspective, I think we can channel that through PEBC or other organizations. I mean, that's part of the value, I think, of this organization is you've got business leaders, many of us chomping at the bit because we have other talented teammates that we work with that would love to do the kind of work that you're asking for. So superintendents that have questions or requests like that, let's see what PEBC can do to help support.
Some pro bono consultation would be great.
I would agree. Some of our principals did some of the facilitated work through PEBC, and that was spectacular. And if there were ever any sponsorships of some of our teams to participate in those professional learning opportunities, that would go a long way for a school district.
See? Keys pro bono. We got that? Not that that's a bad thing at all.
Well, in our organizations, we have time and talent
I know you do.
resources
You've got time,
that
talent,
are looking to do those kinds of things.
We're going to get to some audience questions. Bree, I'm going to have you on the spot here for one of them that just came in here. So thank you for putting these into the chat. We've adapted in resilient ways all year long. We've also lost and eroded elements of our schools. What are some things that might need to be elevated or rebuilt once again as we're coming out of this?
So from my seat, I'm really worried about retaining teachers, retaining high quality teachers at the rate of pay that we're offering and with the lack of social supports often that our teachers are getting. So I really, that's my biggest worry, is how do we retain quality people in the field and in the profession, and how do we continue to encourage our best and brightest to come into the field?
Exactly.
We continue to work on local answers for that, but we'd also like to see, what is the field doing across the state and across the country.
Anyone else, real quickly? No? Let me get to this next question. Back to kind of the equity and inclusion question we started with. From an equity perspective and access, what are your biggest takeaways from what we've just gone through? How do we ensure we don't return to the status quo of what we've experienced? Anyone want to begin and take that first? Here you go.
Well, look, it's basic physics to say inertia is a tough thing to overcome, right? And I think we need to very proactively take stock, and I think this is part of what Chris was talking about, take stock of where people are. And really try to understand where our students are, where our families are, meet them there, and then think about, is our system as it's currently constructed able to meet students and families where they are? If it isn't, we have to then do the hard work, the painful work of saying, what are the changes? Because there's very much going to be a drive to get back to where we were, to get back to what was comfortable. And I think we as leaders have to very proactively say, that ship has sailed, right? Yeah. There is no going back. There's only about what's next, where do we move forward. And I think key to that, you talk about rebuilding, key to that is rebuilding relationships, rebuilding trust. There's a lot of broken trust in our systems right now. Broken trust between families and teachers, broken trust between boards and administrators, broken trust all throughout our systems. And we need to really fundamentally rebuild some of those things so that we can together agree on where we're trying to move to and then move together as a community towards those outcomes.
Nadia, I'll just go to you real quickly from a private sector perspective. How quickly we forget sometimes. You know, I wonder if we come back in a year from now and we go, a pandemic, what was that? Oh no, everything's fine. But from a private sector perspective, we can't forget these lessons.
100% agree. And, you know, Rico, to your point, I think we have to be very intentional to push back on the status quo and the momentum of just going back to business as usual, because that would be a lost opportunity. And the truth is we can't. So thinking about, I'll give two fast examples. One, in the workplace, and this applies to schools as well. You know, what does the future look like? So some of the things we were talking about, maybe a day of asynchronous learning. Could we think about pods? Could we think about how we provide some of the flexibility to our educators, our students, our families, like we're trying to do right now on the business side? So for example, do we, when the pandemic is, contained, to a safe degree, does everybody go back to the office 9 to 5? Those are issues we're looking at right now. And I think the resounding sentiment is no. We should be thinking about the value of what we're doing and what we're driving towards. So I would love to, think about, Rico, to what you were saying, and also some earlier comments about taking some risk. Let's have those dialogues. Let's try some things, and maybe have some different models that we could try. I mean, even districts could try some different models at different schools to see what works and be willing to try and learn and adapt.
Yeah, who knows what this model is going to be? Yes.
To the point, we also did asynchronous in the fall and sort of scaled back on that in the second semester. But as we go to our district accountability committee, really thinking about how do we make sure our professionals have time to grow professionally? In the school day, they're going from class to class, barely getting a lunch. And so what our district accountability committee has really leaned into is this idea of a late start on Wednesdays. We feel like that's a nice time to sort of, the staff and students have started the week, we do a late start. While that's not a new concept in public education to have sort of a late start, but what we want to do differently is to say our children, if we don't want them just at home, we want to provide opportunities for them to be at school during that time, especially if they need supervision and supports. They need breakfast before they get to school, transportation. Maybe if they don't have transportation, they're not going to get to school at all. And so we're trying to problem solve this, and that's where we're going to lean into our business partners and nonprofits in the community to say, could you come in for 2 hours and support with maybe a hiking club or some other type of environmental stewardship? And so we don't want to solve the problems the same ways we've always done that, and we want to think creatively, and we are going to need partnerships from a lot of different people, so it's not one more thing for educators to take on. So that's what I'm looking forward to in the lessons that we've learned.
Well, let's do it.
Let's do it.
Shall we? Pretty easy, right? Chris, let me know how that works out for you.
Will do.
No, it is about partnership, and it is about thinking creatively and being innovative. And thank you all for joining us this morning and sharing some insights. Nadia, thank you very much for joining us remotely. We appreciate it. Next year, we're coming to your house. That's for sure.
Come on over. And I'm going to let my kindergarten loose. He'll be a first grader then. I'll let him loose.
Well, we've got experience in that area. Nadia, Area Vice President, Strategic Partnerships and Ventures, Excel. Rico, thank you as always. Rico Munn, Superintendent of Aurora Public Schools. Chris Godowski, Superintendent of Adams 12 5-star schools. Bree Jones, Superintendent of Levita. Tiffany, thank you with DeVita Health Village. And Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining us. We sure appreciate it. So we'll give them all a virtual round of applause. Thank you all. And thank you for taking the time to join us here today. Business and education together is what this is all about moving forward. And while PBC is headquartered here in Colorado, the work that they are doing is magnified through their many relationships with clients from across the nation and, in fact, around the world. Here's a word from Rocco Migliori, who is superintendent from Westmoreland, New York.
It is a pleasure to be with you today for just a few short minutes to share with you some of what we have been working on in the Westmoreland Central School District. The opportunity to connect with colleagues from across the nation helps us to all become better practitioners. So a special thank you to PBC for making this learning opportunity possible. We here at the Westmoreland Central School District have had the pleasure of working with PEBC for well over 6 years now, and that relationship has evolved and taken us into directions that we hadn't planned or expected. What began with a discussion on how we might conduct a needs assessment so that we could gather data to write a strategic plan has turned into a vital asset and partnership for our entire school community. The structure that they used to help us to gather that data was designed to get us to reflect on our strengths as a district rather than on our weaknesses. So that simple shift in thinking by focusing on what we did well rather than those things we didn't do so well changed the dialogue. This work has allowed us to have very comfortable, reflective, and non-threatening discussions. Everybody likes to talk about the things that are doing well. So those discussions quickly turned to questioning ourselves and asking, how can we do even better? So that focused us to talk about some of the perceived weaknesses because we recognized that to function as a system, all parts needed to work in concert with one another. From there, writing goals, constructing the strategic plan, and developing the action plan became pretty easy. Within our action plan, there were many instructional goals, as you would imagine. So our next conversation with PEBC was about how they might support us in achieving those instructional goals. That led us to be able to send multiple teams to Denver to participate in the Thinking Strategies Institutes. And it also allowed us to offer some investigating thinking strategies workshops here in our district. The thing that probably had the greatest effect on our district, though, was the ability to support our instructional staff so that all that they had studied and learned in these workshops and institutes ultimately made its way into the classroom. It didn't just die a slow death as some other PD initiatives may have. So we accomplished this with instructional coaching offered from PEBC. We needed the ability and the tools to turn theory into practice. Changing practice takes practice, as we know. So we recognized early on that if we wanted all of these best thinking strategies to make their way into the classrooms, we needed to support that work and to give the instructional staff opportunities to learn, to experiment, and to discuss together, and ultimately to revise practice without fear of failing. The instructional coaching model provided that opportunity, and it continues to do so today. So I anticipate we will use this model here in Westmoreland for years to come. The idea of having coaches to learn from and to brainstorm and reflect with has allowed us to really take a deep look at our planning and instructional practices and to integrate best thinking and research. We've learned the art of a lesson study, and now we're quickly turning that art into a science. In addition, I will also mention that our partnership with PEBC has given us access to well-known and renowned authors such as Wendy Ward Hoffer, Debbie Miller, and Ellen Keene. After being introduced to them through this partnership, we've read much of their work, we've conducted book studies in district, and we've even hosted some of them here in Westmoreland for workshops. And our staff has not seen this work or any of these new initiatives as being different because they're all connected to the work that we have done. So as we plan for the post-COVID world, I think a continuation of this work will be more important than ever as we strive to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our kids by giving the instructional staff the resources that they need to do their job as well. And I look forward to this continued partnership. So thanks for listening to the Westmoreland story, and I hope everybody enjoys the remainder of this forum.
And Rocco, thank you for sharing that story. And now it's my pleasure to introduce PEBC Board Chair Marcelina Rivera and Jason Glass, who's Commissioner of Education for the Kentucky Department of Education. Good morning to you both.
Thanks. Good morning, Greg. It's just been a delight to hear from some of my former superintendent colleagues. And as you could hear from this panel, Colorado just has incredible superintendents, and I really have enjoyed getting to hear their perspectives this morning. It's also inspiring to hear the support that public education has from the business community in Colorado. This event is an example of the exemplary partnership the Centennial State enjoys that it's just a model for the nation to follow. I had the honor of attending this event several times during my time as a superintendent in Colorado, and I always have found incredible value in this annual conversation and the collaboration that extends far beyond this hour. So I'm excited to be here today to support PEBC because, as Greg mentioned, PEBC works with schools across the nation and around the world. For example, here in Kentucky, PEBC is working with the Allen County School District to maximize internal capacity to support student-centered classrooms. And PEBC is also working with our Ohio Valley Educational Cooperative to sustain the understanding of what a student-centered classroom looks and sounds like. And just this week, PEBC was working with the Shelby County School District near Louisville on professional learning for their staff.
Well, Jason, we're so excited that you're able to be with us here, and we miss you in Colorado. So, and I'm reflecting, listening today, that the only way to design equitable systems and develop solutions to our workforce challenges is to have these types of collective and transparent conversations together. I want to thank our PEBC board, our sponsors, and all of you in the audience for making that happen today. And it's more important than ever for business leaders and education leaders to converge and find innovative solutions to make our classrooms better places to learn. This is one of the first conversations I've heard where business and education are really leaning in together. And I'm hearing a lot of ideas and design and leaning across to share ideas and to solve these issues together. So I'm very excited. And as some of you may or may not know, this is officially Teacher Appreciation Week. So I want our educators to know that we're grateful to you, not just this week though, but every single day. One way we love to honor our teachers at PEBC is through our Evening to Elevate Educators event. So I'm going to ask you to mark your calendars for November 4th, and I'm excited to announce that for the first time, we'll be recognizing one outstanding teacher with the George Mansfield Award. And during his 47 plus years in education, it's a lot of years teaching kids, George inspired a legion of students, teachers, principals, school staff, and educators everywhere. So superintendents and teachers, if you feel like you're tired this year, think about 47 years really being committed to kids and education. So as we conclude this year's event, my hope is this, that each of you in attendance today read the 16 recommendations developed by the members of the Education System Resiliency and Innovation Initiative. A link is included in the chat. And also think of ways that you can make a difference. One thing you can do right now is to show support for Senate Bill 185. That's the Supporting the Educator Workforce Bill. It incorporates 6 of the coalition workforce recommendations. It's currently making its way through the Colorado legislature, so please call your local representatives and let them know you support this critical legislation. You'll find information in the chat about that as well. And Jason, next to you.
Thanks, Chair Rivera, and thanks for your support for public education in Colorado. I'd also like to call on Colorado's business community to support their superintendents, who are the CEOs of our schools. Some actions that you might consider include contacting your elected officials to express your perspectives on public education policy matters and to support strong public schools. By creating opportunities for CEO to CEO conversations to build that empathy and understanding of what superintendents need to succeed and how they can support business and industry in your communities. You can offer to support measures and develop to retain and develop senior leadership at the school and the district level, and get constructive about getting involved in recruitment and the selection of school leaders. In addition to attending to the learning experiences of students, superintendents also manage board and government relations. They run food service businesses, transportation hubs, security operation, maintenance and custodial crews, and attend to talent management, and the list goes on, all while under considerable pressures and constraints. So I'd urge Colorado's business leaders to support their community superintendents in a meaningful and engaged way. Everyone, we all benefit from a great and well-supported public school system.
No, you're absolutely right, Jason. So, and most importantly, we need to continue these discussions because it's going to take all of us to create sustainable change, for an education system that will improve student outcomes.
Marcelina and Jason, thank you both so much. And Jason, we do miss you. I especially since you owe me some cash. Now I know where you are. But thank you all again for watching us and joining us. As we all know, great teaching starts with a great teacher. It starts with great leaders. PEBC works directly with teachers, as you've heard all morning long, to make sure they're well prepared to give their students the very best learning opportunities. And they work with principals and school leadership to set and really sustain those conditions that allow great teaching to flourish. And that's what it's all about. It's hard work, but thankfully they do not have to do it alone. And as you heard today, PEBC is bringing together leaders from the education, government, business, and nonprofit sectors to talk about education issues, share their perspectives, and to jointly, collaboratively support initiatives they believe will advance the teaching profession and, most importantly, positively impact student achievement. To learn more about the important work, visit pebc.org. Again, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again